Hey, Margie here. Many of us are not aware that postbiotics can play a huge role when it comes to our bones, our gut health, and even our overall well being. Well, today we're going to talk about postbiotics because many of us are familiar with probiotics and even prebiotics, but really aren't familiar with the health benefits of postbiotics. So we're going to go over all of that today in this episode with our very special guest, Steven Wright. And Stephen is a health engineer, Kalish Functional Medicine Institute graduate, and gut health specialist. Since 2009, Stephen's been researching, writing, and building products around gut, brain, and immune related issue. And he's overcome these issues himself and uses these painful and challenging experiences to help others. He's the co-founder of HealthyGut.com and has created products that have helped people worldwide. But today we're going to talk about bones, the research behind bones, and what are postbiotics and how they can help. So this is full of lots of great information. So stay tuned. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Margie. I'm excited. I'm excited to be back.
Yes, I cannot believe it's been 4 years since, I think it's over 4 years since you were here last time. Boy, does time go quickly, unbelievably. But the good news is even more research is even more, your message is even more compelling now. So I think what I love is that this is something people, what we're going to talk about today, can just really make a big difference for so many people's lives. And it's not something that's hard to do. So welcome.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, I have a soft spot for this, for the bone crowd and the gut crowd, and so I'm just happy to be back. And yeah, let's dive into the fun new stuff.
Yeah, and I think what's so exciting about what you do, and when we talk about the gut and the postbiotics and everything we're gonna talk about today, is that this can really have a profound positive influence on so many people's lives and their bones, and it's not something that everybody knows about. We all know about probiotics, and a lot of us have heard about prebiotics, and we'll get into this more, but people really are confused when it comes to this. So I'm so glad we're gonna really dive into it and explain so that everybody understands who this can help, how this can help, and just the details. But before we get started, I always love to share the backstory so people understand why you're so passionate about the work you did. And you were really a human guinea pig when you started out. And I remember, I don't know if I told you this last time, but I remember way back, I remember hearing your story way, way back before you started your company, just a long time ago. And it was so compelling because you yourself suffered and then you turned that suffering into something positive. So why don't you share, the cliff notes, because that could take a whole hour, but yeah.
Yeah. This is actually year 16 for me for doing gut health online and sharing my story. So it's kind of incredible how the years have flown by. But yeah, I come from a what I now know as a family history of gut issues and IBS, and I was considered the gas man by my extended family. Like at a holiday party with 30 family members, I was the stinkiest of all the stinkies. And and so when I went off to college, I kind of knew that I was kind of already embarrassed. I kind of already had some really experience, like really painful experiences. But then when I went off to college and I joined a fraternity, that's when I really got to live with other humans that were not my family. And I started to realize like, oh, I'm definitely different. Like me having to go to the bathroom for an hour before class, or having episodes of pain and being really smelly. Like most everybody else is not necessarily dealing with that. And so after college, I had my quote unquote dream job at the time. I was a consultant in Chicago. I worked like 16 stories up in a high rise. And at the time, I was in the most pressure, the most stress of my life. I had just exited a very intense engineering program. And I would say I was at my quote unquote like sickest point, although I didn't really know it, but I was having panic attacks. I was having exercise induced asthma. I had to carry an allergy or an inhaler with me everywhere I went. I'd have seasonal allergies. And then, of course, I was having bloating and gas pain after every meal. And it didn't matter if I ate salad and chicken. I know because at the time I was around 250 pounds and I was trying to cut down because I was pretty, I was pretty overweight for my frame at that point in time. And so I would eat a lot of chicken and salad with like those no calorie sprays and stuff. This is back in like 2007, 2008. And, and then other times I'd have to go out with clients and we'd have burgers and beers or pizza or something. And no matter what I ate, my belly would just balloon up. I would have all this pain in my gut. It would like make me softly cry. And then if you've ever been in that place, like the best thing to do is fart because you got to get the pressure out. And so I was the stinky guy in the office, and my boss called me down one Friday and said, "Hey, your coworkers have been complaining. You've got to get this handled if you want to keep working here." And so that was of all the issues that finally drove me into the doctor's offices in Chicago. And I saw several, I saw three different Western docs trying to get some answers. They basically said, you have family history. You're not that sick. Suck it up. You can have any antibiotic you want. You should take Metamucil and eat whole grains. And I had already actually been on antibiotics and ended up in the hospital because I was taking them for acne and I like depleted my entire gut in high school. So I was anti that. And I already taken Metamucil. That didn't work for me. So I was kind of like just stuck being angry at the Western medical system. And luckily, I called a buddy from college. He said, look, try this specific carbohydrate diet. I had gone gluten free for celiac, and that didn't work for me. But this special diet, this exclusion diet, changed my life. And so I was like, all right, let's do it. And so within the first week of changing my diet, and this diet is now it has it has certain rules and things, but basically it's like meats, fruits, and vegetables, and it eliminates starches and grains and beans and a lot of processed foods. And so you would kind of call it almost an autoimmune paleo, but it's not quite that. Um, anyways, the first 7 days, probably 50% of my gas pains were gone. And that like just clicked on something inside of my being, like the immense embarrassment that I had been suffering, like accidents on commuter buses and just not fun stuff, as well as anger, like rage about my situation and about the medical system kind of all came together to be like, wow, I have power here. And so that started an immediate search on the internet, which was not like it is today. That was this 2008, 2009. So it was like listservs and weird forums and stuff. But immediately I started using digestive supplements and I got even better. And then immediately I would, search out new things. And I'm also somebody who I'm a hedonist at heart. Like I want my sugar, I want my wine, I want to indulge in things. And so I wasn't happy with this idea that I had to eat this very narrow select group of foods in order to be well. And I could never eat out at restaurants, had to bring my own food in. Like that just didn't work for me. And so, I ended up studying functional medicine. I learned about, I had some parasites, I had H. pylori, I had some estrogen imbalances. I had all these layers of the onion to basically unfold that took me from one layer to the next on my healing journey. And I've just kind of chronicled that throughout my journey. I've tried to teach people when it made sense from the science as well as from clinical practice, because I think that's something that is not always true, right? We can have theory, we can have biology, we can have clinical studies in mice and animals, but like the actual practice, the actual consumption of a nutrient or a mineral doesn't always translate in regular life. And so that's kind of where my engineering background and the way I sort of problem solve kind of that's kind of what I offer to the world.
Oh, I love that. And then you started your company and now you've been, doing this for quite a while and helped so many people. I love it. All right, so let's go to the topic at hand today, postbiotics. So why don't you tell us what that is in detail? Really explain it because I know this is so confusing and I'm not going to say anymore. You just take it away, but really explain it so that people understand. Because I think some people, you know, when you're going to say about short chain fatty acids, like they may have a little understanding, but let's explain it so people really get a grasp of what we're talking about here because it's very powerful.
Yeah, so I actually want to start with an analogy because I think people remember sometimes analogies more than like specific words that I'm going to say. So I don't know if you remember, but I remember being like fascinated by the Human Genome Project. Like there was so many billions of dollars, and we were going to decode the human genome, and then we were going to solve human disease. And all this money went into it, and then at the end of it, they were like, "Oh, well, it didn't really do that much." Like it kind of is like genes are 5 to 10% of our health outcomes. It's actually what the genes are doing, the epigenetics, what the genes are doing, that's what matters for health. Well, that is exactly how you can think about the probiotic revolution and the gut revolution. So for the last 15 years, billions of dollars have gone into probiotic development, research, microbiome research, and it's good. Probiotics are important for certain aspects, but really, it's not about the probiotics. It's about what the probiotics do, like what they give off, which is postbiotics. And so it's not necessarily about a probiotic or taking a probiotic. It's actually about what the probiotics do for us symbiotically as a human sort of bug interaction. That's where the magic is. And so I think at one level you could say like the probiotic revolution is over, long live probiotics. And what's happening now is this postbiotic revolution where we're starting to say, oh, it's not whether you have the bug, it's whether the bug is making something that helps us. And so that is what the excitement has been about for me for the last 5 to 7 years. And it's where the field continues to go and where you'll hear postbiotic, you'll hear butyrate, you'll hear something called short chain fatty acids. Like this will be the future of the summits and the podcast for the next 10 years. And it's really exciting because I feel like we're actually getting to clinical needle moving like options for people, like things that actually are going to move the needle for them in their day-to-day life. And so that's the excitement. So you said prebiotic in the beginning a little bit ago. So just focus in on the first three letters. So pre is before the microbiome. Then we have probiotic. So basically think of that as a healthy bug, and a prebiotic is a healthy food for healthy bugs. And then a postbiotic is post what the healthy bug gives off. And this is a giant classification. It's like a really big umbrella term, but essentially it's a metabolite, or a funny way of saying it is I like to say the poop. The poop of the microbiome is postbiotics. And so we need that stuff. That metabolites actually are core to our health. And that's the crazy thing about butyrate and short chain fatty acids. So short chain fatty acids are the classification of different like lengths of fatty acid. You'll hear about acetate, propanonate, and then butyrate is the star of the show. And so the bugs take your prebiotics or your fermentable foods, so your vegetables, your fruits, your starches, and they turn that, if it's healthy enough, if you can tolerate all this and it's healthy enough, they turn that into short chain fatty acids, among other things. And then butyrate is the star of the show. Without butyrate, enough of it, your gut health will erode. Like you will lose, you will have an inflammatory microbiome. You will have leaky gut syndrome. You will lose your mucosal thickness. Literally, you'll lose your oxygen gradient. Like your gut will fall apart because butyrate is so critical to the inner workings of the colon epithelial cells and part of the small intestine as well. Beyond that, 5 to 10% of butyrate goes systemic out into our body. And every single place we've studied, does butyrate impact Parkinson's? Does it impact lungs? Does it impact bones, eyes, muscle development? The answer is yes. That butyrate going systemically is a must-have component to turning on the right switches for health and longevity in every area of our body.
Okay, so let's stop for a second. So now we know butyrate is so important. We know it helps everything. What is the issue here? Why are people low in butyrate? What's going on?
Yeah, I think it's an accidental confluence of Western living. So you need this formula or this sort of set of conditions to make butyrate, right? You have to have fuel, meaning you need fiber, you need prebiotics, you need colorful pigments in our fruits and vegetables. And many of us are just not eating as much fruits and vegetables or fiber as our ancestors used to. Why? Because it's so much easier to DoorDash something or grab a something out of a gluten-free box or something. Like gluten-free food is just like blown up. Back when I started in 2009, like there was no gluten-free label. So like now we have all these options for healthy eating. Unfortunately, they're processed food options. And so it strips the actual fuel for the fire of butyrate, if you will. Just like if you don't have enough wood for your fire, it doesn't matter how many times you spark it, it's not going to work. So first you need enough fuel on a regular basis. And I think a lot of people are accidentally eating too little fuel, or it upsets their tummy Therefore, they don't eat it in the first place. So we can circle back to that scenario. The next is you need to have the right microbiome. You have to have those bugs that make butyrate. And it's not just the butyrate producers, because the microbiome is really like, I like to describe it as like the ideal 1960s hippie community. Like seriously, think flowers and music. Like somebody is taking care of the children, someone's doing the farming, someone takes care of the houses, someone's like, everybody has a role, everybody has a niche in the ideal hippie community. The same thing is true in your microbiome. Every bug has a ecological niche that helps the other bugs around it. And so butyrate producers actually need other bugs to prep the fibers and prep the polyphenols to make them ready for those butyrate producers to do their job. So if you have a microbiome that's called dysbiosis, and dysbiosis is a big word to basically mean either you have a not enough growth, like the hippie community is only like 7 people instead of 70 people, or it can mean that the amount of people in the community is not enough. So let's say you need 70, but you only have 40. And so microbiome dysbiosis is you have too few species at too low of growth. And so if you have either dysbiosis or a lack of fuel or both, you just don't make butyrate. Like there's not like this isn't like a debate. It is the simple fact of, if you've ever had ants in your house and you're like, why are the ants in the house? And then you find out like your kids or something are putting sugar or snacks on the floor, and then they're going like nature grows for food. Like it will grow. And if there's no a capacity to grow, it just can't grow. It's just a non-negotiable. And so I think on accident, through antibiotic usage, through environmental toxins, through our eating patterns, even exercise can contribute. We've kind of created this storm where butyrate ends up naturally declining over the years, and the gut starts to decline. And then you end up in this kind of stuck situation where you need certain foods, but those foods hurt you, and you need your microbiome to repair, but all the probiotics and things you're taking aren't repairing it.
And the interesting thing with dysbiosis, it really contributes to osteoporosis. It really contributes to arthritis. It really contributes to everything. So it besides having this storm for so many things going on now, our butyrate is reduced. What about just aging? Someone who's eating well as they aged, is there a significant decline just with age itself?
There is, unfortunately. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah, there definitely is, especially 60 and 70 are like levels of age where the studies start to show butyrate starts to fall off a cliff, and dysbiosis goes way up. And so then this contributes to, you know, um, lack of immunity. It contributes to even more bone loss, even more, osteoclast formation, things like that. And so, yeah, there's aging as well that is a component here.
Wow. Something that, not doesn't it's not sounding good here, Stephen. But I guess there is good news. Are there ways people could test, or is that usually not necessary? Like, are there tests that will confirm this if if there is an issue with butyrate? I know we can see dysbiosis on the different stool tests. What would people look for in terms of the short chain fatty acids in the butyrate?
Yeah, most people aren't ready to go to this level, but there's not like, you can't just like you can draw your blood to see how your vitamin D level is doing. I wish there was a simple test like that for butyrate, but there's not yet. Now basically what you'd have to do is there's certain stool tests you can do, where it'll measure the amount of butyrate, called fecal butyrate, in your stool. And so you'd basically take that test marker, and then you would do, like you said, a microbiome test, which those are two different tests usually. And you look at the species that make butyrate and see, are they low, high, where are they at? And so if you had low fecal butyrate and low microbiome species number, you'd have a definitely, raging, you have a fire here, take care of it. But part of the problem here is we don't have good data on fecal butyrate. Everybody kind of has a different digestive tract, and the testing for it is really archaic at the moment. And so you can't just take a fecal butyrate and say, I'm good to go. I don't have low butyrate. And you can't necessarily just take a microbiome test and say, well, look, my butyrate producers are in the middle, therefore I'm okay. And if you overlay those two markers with all your symptoms, say you have bone loss, say you have muscle issues, say you have gut, like I mean, if you have any gut complaints, like once you overlay the symptoms on there, that's kind of when you get the full sort of diagram of the three areas. It's not easy at the moment, and so that's where I think risk factor symptomology, that's probably our best bet right now. And I think about it as like we all kind of want to be living like a butyrate life, like a life that is encouraging butyrate.
Yeah, I love that, and the good news, and we'll talk about this more after, because I really wanna tell everyone why for bones this is so important, but we'll talk about that later, but the good news is that once you start taking butyrate, it doesn't take how long it doesn't take that long to really see an improvement, so I think that's what's exciting. It's not like, "Oh, take this for a year, and then you'll see." That how long does it typically I mean, I know there's a wide variety, but
Yeah, the hard part about butyrate is it's like vitamin D or magnesium. And I think of those as like three molecules that if you have low amounts of those molecules, everything's wrecked, right? Like it's tied to every disease, it's every symptom. And so you can't say, well, just look for if you grow a third eye or if your lips get stronger. It's like you can't just say it only does one thing. It actually does a systematic upregulation for an entire body. So I can't tell someone what is necessarily wrong with their body to watch for. But I would say that usually within the first like 2 to 3 weeks, once you get to a therapeutic dosage, most people will report like benefits somewhere. Some people will say it's in their sleep. Some people will say it's in their gut. Some people will say it's somewhere in their skin, or bones take a little bit longer because it's bone and it's not just overnight sensation. But the therapeutic dose is, I think, the issue that most people are not understanding, and that is from our clinical data, from our like, so we have a lot of clinics that use our products. Our clinical data says at least 1,500 milligrams of enterically coated tributyrin is needed to move test markers and symptom markers up to 3,000 milligrams. And so you want to make sure you get into that range of like 3 capsules a day to 6 capsules a day to really notice the effect.
and I know we're gonna get into some more detail about the different types of butyrates, it's not all the same. But just since you mentioned this, when they're taking that, is it better to take it with food on an empty stomach? What's your recommendation? What time of day?
Our product Tributyl X has an enteric coating on it. And so enteric coatings, most people are not familiar with them, but basically what that means is it's protected from the stomach completely. It's not delayed release. It's not partially protected. It's absolutely protected. At least the studies show that over 2.5 hours of submersion in simulated acid, there's no leakage in the capsules. And so that's very different than delayed release capsules, which open in 40 to 45 minutes in the stomach. What that means is you're going to get the full active ingredient deeper into the gut. And so, why this is really important is that the entire gut is affected, like our small intestine to our large intestine. There's a lot going on there, and so tributyrin is also a different form of sodium butyrate, a different form than sodium butyrate, and they have differential effects inside the human body. And so you'll want to make sure that you're using a product that's tributyrin. We recommend the enteric coating because we just see like people switching to our brand from other brands and reporting better effects. And we believe that's because we're getting more of the active ingredient down into the gut. But it is definitely one thing where you're going to have to read your labels, because now that postbiotics are becoming in vogue, right? People are putting sprinkles, right? They'll put a sprinkle of 100 milligrams of tributyrin or 300 milligrams of tributyrin, and then they'll sell you a postbiotic and they'll say, hey, they'll quote all the same research I quote, but it's not even in this. You're not even talking about apples to apples here. You're talking about two different things because they're not using enough effective dosage.
No, that's so important. That's why I'm so glad you're here because, we get a little bit of information. Oh, this is helpful. We see that. Oh, this vitamin has all these things, or this complex has all these things. Yes, try butyrate whatever. And but yet it's not enough dosage. It's not the clinical dosage that's been effective in studies. And so, here we think we're doing our best and we have such good intentions, but yet it's really a waste. So that upsets me so much because I do see that, I'll look at people's supplements and different things, and I'm like, they mean well, and they've heard the information just like you said. So I think that happens more often than not in terms of, yeah, just in terms of different supplements. But let's go to the bones. So, because I have the bones crew here. So let's show, because there are studies, and this is exciting because, I like to see where we can make changes. And this is an area, I mean, we know the gut is so important. That's when people ask me, well, where do I start? There's so many things going on, and the whole issue with osteoporosis can be so overwhelming. I always tell people, you can't just go on the medicines and do the exercise. You have to get to the root cause. If you really want to be effective and really want to make a difference. And so I always say, start with the gut, because when you start with the gut, other things get better because the gut affects so much. And so why don't you share about the research? Because I think it's so exciting.
Yeah, yeah. So the research has come further in the last 4 years, and it's continuing to explode all over the place. So, like I said, I used to say butyrate is the future, and this is my theory. I think it's now fact butyrate is the future, and so we're starting to see this immense outpouring of research. So I would say to classify the research at this point in time, I would say mice and rat studies have gone ahead and just there's many repeated studies now showing that butyrate improves osteoporosis like symptoms or bone loss symptoms, mostly by stopping osteoclasts. So the parts of the bone that are going to eat your bone, it doesn't force them, but it encourages that not as many of them to be around, which is really important for bone loss. And then there are a few studies on boosting osteoblasts, so the cells that actually make new bone. And then I would say the umbrella of research suggests the inflammatory markers, which I'm sure people are so aware of, like IL-6 and all these cytokines that basically are like the inflammation that people are talking about that ends up causing bone loss or every other disease. When you take butyrate, those markers also go down. So you're taking um, you're basically getting the perfect sort of storm for bone where you're getting more of the cells to make the bone, you're slowing the ones that eat the bone, and then you're improving the cytokine environment around the bone and around your body. And so that's like a pretty amazing trifecta. The research now into humans has gotten, as far as I'm aware, to the point where they've identified those of us who have high bone mineral density, and they've done studies on those ones versus the lower mineral density people, and they have identified that those people with high bone mineral density have a microbiome full of butyrate producers, and they have a high amount of butyrate. And so we don't yet have the total double-blind placebo-controlled studies on humans where we give them tributyrin and we see their bone remodel over the next 6 to 12 months. We don't have that data yet, but I would say that the unequivocal evidence that butyrate is absolutely essential to health and the mountain of animal data is that if your microbiome is healthy and producing more butyrate, your bones are going to be thicker, stronger, and better off than if you have dysbiosis and you have lower amounts of butyrate.
Yeah. I mean, it just makes so much sense because people who have gut issues, all sorts of gut issues, have lower bone density. I mean, those are known risk factors. Anybody with, I mean, really every level in terms of, Crohn's, colitis, any issues with gut if we're not absorbing our nutrients. I mean, and inflammation. We know inflammation increases the activity of the increases the activity of the osteoclast and reduces the activity of the osteoblast. So the fact that butyrate does the opposite and helps all those areas, I think, is really exciting. And is there any downside to the butyrate? Is there any people that should really be aware of it or not take it?
Not really. I mean, there's no absolute no's. The people who have to be very careful, there's one class of folks, and those are the super constipated individuals. So if you're using enemas or you're pooping like once per week or worse than that, you need to go slow with butyrate. And the research, so this is my theory, this is Steven's theory. This is not proven yet in the research, but there's some clinical data to suggest that the more constipated you are, potentially the less butyrate you have. And so I don't know, most people aren't practitioners like you and I. They don't have a huge data set, but when someone is really low in something and then you introduce something, because their body's optimized for the really low state, when you give them the thing they need, it can actually be very upsetting to the whole ecosystem, and it can kind of flare people. And so with extreme constipation or even like intense constipation, people need to go slower and just kind of go like one pill every 3 days, at least with our brand. Because again, our brand is 500 milligrams completely protected from the stomach. That's a big load of tributylin compared to like say 100 milligrams in a capsule that's just a veggie cap or a gelatin cap. And so people need to go like once every 3 days. They might need to increase their magnesium or their whatever they're using to deal with their constipation. And so that's really the only group that has some sort of reaction at times to it. But it is like sometimes I just, you know, sometimes I just sit and think and wonder, and I'm like we can't make butyrate. Like there's nothing that we can do. It is our bugs, and it's the combination of our food and our bugs that make the butyrate. So like at some level, we need this for every part of our body, and we are reliant on this ecosystem of bugs and the food we feed them. And so it's actually one of those amazing supplements that is sort of universal to all human health, where you're going to see better outcomes in general, it appears, if you're on butyrate. And which outcome, I can't say that for you because it's a mixture of your issues and things, but I think the data is like that of magnesium and of vitamin D3, where it's just a class of compound that without it, you're in a world of hurt.
Hey, Margie here. As a physical therapist, I know firsthand how important exercise is for our bones, overall health, and happiness. And unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion on what exercises are safe and effective for people with osteoporosis. That's why I created this handout that contains a 30-minute video where I explain the concepts so you understand the do's and don'ts when it comes to exercise. And this is important because this way you can go into any class and know what you should be doing and what you should avoid. Because too many people are doing exercises that actually increase their risk of spinal fractures. I also included videos of me demonstrating effective balance, posture, and weight-bearing exercises you can put into your day right away. So all you need to do to access this handout, it's free, is go to tinyurl.com/osteoporosis exercises. So it's tinyurl.com, again, /osteoporosis exercises, or you can click the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
So let's say the person starts with the butyrate because they're not eating the best diet and they're having all these symptoms. And then they get their, and they're taking the prebiotics and postbiotics, and they're really working on their gut. They're eating all this fermented food and they're just doing all these great things. Is there a period of time where they would stop is it something that people should take for life, or is it something that maybe some people can stop, or they can, what have you seen? Because you've been working with this for so many years.
Yeah, I would say that it is individual, right? Like, so if you are currently eating like a low fiber diet, a low vegetable diet, and you have gut problems, it's gonna take you a while to increase your overall plant and starch diet. And you might, if you're somebody who's just you live a life that's too crazy to focus on that or whatever, or like your taste buds don't agree with that, like you might be somebody who takes tributylin X or butyrate for life, right? Because you're not doing the habits you need to cultivate the butyrate that your body needs. But if you're someone who has the capacity to modify these things in your life, you're able to, get your prebiotics and your fiber up to like 30 grams a day or higher even. You are exercising because exercise increases butyrate. You are going outdoors. Outdoors increases butyrate. So you're living all the healthy lifestyle tips that every summit and every podcast talks about. If your symptoms are also like your lab markers are also receding, like you're seeing low HSCRP, you're seeing better DEXA scans, you're seeing good insulin sensitivity, like you're seeing all the hallmarks of health, then I don't think you necessarily need to be on something like tributylin X, right? Or butyrate in that regard. You're living the life and you have the proof in third-party data as well as how you feel. But if you are like me and you have a pretty poor genetic hand and you've also made some mistakes along the way and you've done some things to your microbiome, when I start going off supplements in certain aspects to my gut, my lab markers fall apart and my symptoms are first. I don't need the lab markers because I can feel the symptoms happening first. And so I think there are some of us who've just done enough damage to ourselves. We might need a little helper for a long time or the rest of our life. I'm not sure. But I think a lot of people can maybe do a short course of, and I say short because I'm thinking in lifetimes, but like 6 to 24 months where they're remodeling their gut, they're redeveloping their pathways. I think the mistake is to see success on it in like 3 months or 6 months and then think you've handled it, go off of it, and then repeat that cycle in another 2 years from now.
Plus, as we age, as you said, we have less butyrate. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, I would say, and this is Steven's supplement stack for his family and for myself. It is vitamin D3, K2, magnesium, glycinate, and tributylnex for life. And that is just how it's going to be because all those things line up with every marker of health we want and every sort of system of health we want.
Okay. Stephen's health.
Longevity stack, I guess.
Longevity. So it's interesting though, we didn't touch on, which I think is so important. You didn't just sort of come across this. You didn't just like, okay, I'll just grab this tributyrin. There was a whole process involved. And you've also explained the difference between the two types that are available. Like what is the difference? And, why did you talked about the coding, which I think is important because if it breaks down when we don't need it to, that's not what we want. But why don't you just explain, it wasn't a quick process how you found this, and it's an interesting story. So I'm big into stories, I think, and I think
Okay.
people like to hear too, because when you understand, oh, okay, I got this, I think it makes it all even clearer. So tell us a little bit about how, again, the shorter version, not the long extended, but how you actually found this specific supplement that now that your company creates.
Yeah, so I realize that most people aren't like me. I can actually go into Google and into PubMed and lose myself for 3 or 4 hours just reading research studies, and I have a ball. Like I have 200 Chrome tabs open right now of studies that I just found, and I'm so excited. They're like little Easter eggs that I find, and those little rabbit holes that I go on lead to interesting places. I'm also the type of person who, if you have a miracle pill to sell, I will buy it. Like I am all in on it. And so when the data about butyrate started coming out in like the 2010s, and I was already doing gut health, right? The data on the butyrate was already exciting back then. And so I was interested in it. The first products to market are almost always the active component, in this case butyrate, bonded with salt. So sodium butyrate is that's the universal butyrate product. It's usually the universal product for any category at the beginning because it's cheap and it's fast and it's stable. And so sodium butyrate is the majority of research on butyrate because of that. It's cheap to make, it's stable, and it's easy to store, all those things. The problem with sodium butyrate, even though there's a lot of good literature in mice, rats, and humans, is that there is a threshold where you start to get too much sodium for a human body. So this is where we go from theory to practice, where it's like the clinical application of using sodium butyrate just didn't live up to the hype. And so I tried sodium butyrate throughout the years because I would get so excited on one of these rabbit holes and be like, this is the key. And then I would take it and be like, dang it, I meet all the criteria for needing butyrate and that this product just doesn't work for me. And then also the studies started to come out that there's an upper limit of about 4 grams per day because I don't know if you've ever taken like a teaspoon or a tablespoon of salt on an empty stomach. I don't recommend it. It will cause diarrhea usually. And part of that is just like if you threw salt on your yard, you'll kill your grass. Too much salt will kill microbiome as well. Salt is a special compound. We need it. I'm not saying salt's bad, but I'm just saying like the way in which we take it, we have to be kind of careful with what we're doing to our microbiome and to our gut. And so luckily, quickly, scientists discovered tributylin. So this is butyrate bonded with fat. So it's a fat butyrate and versus like a sodium butyrate or a salt butyrate or a calcium butyrate or a magnesium butyrate. So those are the kind of the 4 areas of butyrate at the moment. I'm sure there's other breakthroughs happening all around the world, but for the moment, it's like fat backed or mineral backed. And so the research quickly showed that tributyrin, the fat backed molecule, actually boosts the blood plasma levels of butyrate better orally than a IV of sodium butyrate in humans. And that was like, when I found that study, I was like, whoa, that never wins. Like you can never, IV is like the best way to get something. And to take something orally and have better outcomes than IV, that's a pretty cool compound. And then I saw a safety study they did on cancer patients where they got up to 42,000 milligrams a day. For reference, that's like 90% of a bottle that we make. And every single day these patients were taking it. And yes, they did have some dropouts, but it was due to nausea, blood sugar dysregulation, like mild symptoms, not like, heart attacks or like really bad adverse events. And so then I was like, wow, we never get this kind of safety data on humans. We have safety data. We also have like pharmacokinetics data on humans. And then when I was just studying and talking with other practitioners, butyrate is not like a new thing to functional medicine or integrative medical practitioners. They've known about this, and many of them have tried sodium butyrate in their practices, and then they gave up very quickly because it stinks and it just doesn't seem to produce the results that the biology and the research suggests it would. And so when I was going through this and I started to learn about tributyrin, I was able to connect with a scientist in Spain, and this is like his whole life. He's been doing butyrate for 30 years in the feed industry for animals, and then in the for humans as well, the last like 7 years. And so he perfected a way to make extraordinarily like clean butyrate, so 99% clean butyrate, tributyrin in this case, versus most other companies are around 90%. They were around 70%. They're getting better. And then his invention around the extraction and creation of tributyrin was big. But then he was also able to find an enteric coating capsule, like a patent pending capsule out of Europe. And so working with him, I was like, I got to have this product, because like with every product, I'm like, hey, if acai berry is going to give me a 6-pack, give me all the acai, you can give me. And then of course it didn't give me a 6-pack. But in this case, I'm like, all right, man, I'll buy a bunch of stuff from you and I'll start to test it on myself, on my family, on my team. And immediately we're all like, wow, this is way different than the other tributyrins on the market and way different than the other sodium butyrates. And so we worked together to bring tributyrin X to the United States. And that's kind of like how the formula is different than the other products out there. And I know that it's more expensive. It's more expensive because of the total amount of tributyrin and the enteric coating. And I wish we, hopefully in the future, as volumes go up and more awareness comes to butyrate, the cost will come down. But the other reason is a lot of other brands, like you said, are just putting 300 milligrams into their product. And the research is like, that's just like sprinkling like a little fertilizer in your lawn, hoping that it's going to make it all green and perfect. Like you need enough fertilizer to really change a lawn. And the same is true in the gut. You need enough butyrate to really change a gut and change a body. And so that's where, we finally see, I think, repeatable clinical evidence that this product is different and it works really well for most people.
You wanna share how many years has it been now that you've been using that this product has been in the United States? And
4.5.
4.5. So you wanna share a little bit about what people have reported? I mean, because it's very
Sure.
exciting. I mean, to me, that the proof's in the pudding, it's all great, but then when you hear that people have gotten better and, all sorts of things. So what have you heard from the people using it?
Yeah, I would say the people who have the most remarkable stories are people who have had gut issues for a long time. This is not their first podcast. This is not their first go around with gut products, and they just haven't had a breakthrough. And especially if they've been on restricted diets, meaning they've been on like a FODMAP diet or some sort of SCD or GAPS diet or elimination diet, and they just are reactive to kind of all kinds of foods. Those people can see pretty remarkable changes in their ability to tolerate food like within 30 days. And that is really like, that's kind of the core to what I do because of my struggles. So people with leaky gut and food sensitivities, they have a big breakthrough usually. People with loose stools, if they've been struggling with loose stools, this could be related to medications they're on, phases of life they're in. Maybe they have to take some antibiotics for some other infection or something like that. Tributyrin X has been really important for them and very helpful. Like so many really happy customers. Now that doesn't mean if you have like regular stools or constipation, you can't take it, because that's not how it works. It's like a balancer It's not necessarily anti one thing or the other. There's actually data on taking butyrate for constipation. People with the constipation get better as well. Um, and then I would say sleep is this really odd one. So if you have a sleep tracker or you're struggling with your deep sleep numbers, there's data in mice and rats, and now we have testimonials in humans that taking tributylrex before bed can be really helpful for getting those numbers up. You don't have to take it with food, but you can take it with food. It just what I would say, whatever the best time. I never answered that part of your question. I would say the best time to take it is whenever you remember to take it. It's because of the enteric coating. It doesn't actually matter if it's with food or without food. It'll still get to where it needs to go. And
Wait
then
1 second though, wait, because a lot
yeah,
of people, there's a tremendous amount of people listening that have issues with their sleep. So exactly, just tell us when is the best time that you found from your experience for people who have sleep issues to take it? Is it with dinner? Is it right before sleep, an hour before? What have you found seems to be the best for people?
yeah, the perfect time would be an hour before bed, or some people just go right before bed. The studies that what you'd be looking for is that non-REM deep sleep numbers. And as somebody who used to get only like 15 to 20 minutes a night based on different sleep trackers, life is so hard when you're only getting that much deep sleep. Like it's so like I can't even tell you how much better my brain is if I just get 40 minutes. I mean, nowadays I'm above 90 minutes, and Tribunal is part of the reason why I got there. There's a lot of other things. It wasn't just that. But yeah, for people with sleep issues, you're especially with the brain fog in the morning, like you don't feel rested. Tribunal is not like a universal miracle for sleep, but I'm saying specifically the research and our data from customers suggests for those people who have the deep sleep component, right before bed, 1 to 2 capsules seems to be like a really important tool for them.
Oh, that's great. And the thing is, I mean, what upsets me so much is that the younger generation, I hear stories. My nephew says, "Oh, everyone's in line for the bathroom." It's not, this is so prevalent, people with dysbiosis and gut issues, and it's very upsetting. But on the other hand, that's why I think it's great for people listening to even share this with if you know people who are struggling, because there's so much that can be done. And how are you feeling now? I mean, how's your gut and your gas and everything?
Oh, yeah, really good. I mean, I'm in a very stressful time right now with a whole house remodel that is just not going not going well. If you've ever been through a remodel and lived in it like I'm doing right now, you know my pain. So between this, it's mostly stress related. So my gut right now is as sensitive to stress. So on a weekend or a normal day, my gut is super solid. But on these high stress days when there's a water leak or something going wrong, yeah, I still have to struggle, and I definitely take Tributylrex every single day. And if I get too stressed, I will increase my dosage to modulate things.
But the problem you were having is way gone from your.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have bloating or visceral hypersensitivity on a regular basis. If I go wild with corn chips or something, I'll definitely get some gas. But too many gluten-free treats or something. But I think that's pretty normal for most individuals. But yeah, my gut is thankfully, I would say, the healthiest it's ever been, and I take care of it. I take, the products I make and the products we sell at Healthy Gut are not they're selfish. I mean, yes, I want to help people. Yes, I do not want to see people in pain, and I want to be on the right side of history to try to help us heal as a population. But also, they're very selfish. Like without some of these products, I don't feel good, and I don't know that I'm going to live as long as I want to live, because I want to be with my family. I want to be with my wife for 50 years, and I know that the statistics and the data on butyrate loss, and then that increasing inflammatory pathways to like everything, literally, heart disease, diabetes, brain issues, all kinds of autoimmune conditions. Like that is, everyone was worried about inflammation, right? Everyone's like, oh, we got to get rid of the inflammation, right? And then they're like, oh, wait, it's the inflammation is kind of coming from the gut. So you want to get rid of the gut dysbiosis. And so now every single disease you can link has high inflammation and it has gut dysbiosis. Those are known quantities now. We know that in every disease state. But now we're drilling down to that next layer of like, what about gut dysbiosis is so important? And it's butyrate. at least maybe not the full story, but a huge component of that story is without butyrate, you get gut dysbiosis, you get inflammation, and then that leads with some other probably environmental factors to that disease or that outcome. And I don't want that to happen. I would like to live as long as I can.
Yeah, I love that. One more thing, because we could go on and on, but before we got together today, we started talking, and you mentioned something so interesting about environmental toxins. So I'd love you to share that because that's something that was new to me. So can you want to just tell people about those studies with the environmental toxins?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think actually most people don't know this, but antibiotic studies. So antibiotics, one of the reasons why they're bad for us, and I'm not saying don't take them. If you have a infection and you need to get rid of that infection and it's life threatening, take the antibiotic already. Like just do it. But take Tributyrin X with it. And then for like 12 weeks after it to help recover your microbiome. That's what the studies are showing is that probiotics have kind of failed in their protection of the microbiome during antibiotics. And some of them can actually make your recovery of the microbiome longer, according to the studies. And so there are new studies on butyrate in mice and rats, and universally, when taken with antibiotics, they protect the microbiome from that damage from the antibiotic. What I came across today actually was a study on an environmental toxin. Now, this is very specific, but I think it has generalized application. So this is a toxin called BDE-209, and it is a fire retardant. And the US has been behind the EU. The EU banned it a long time ago. The US is just now starting to ban it. It was added to a banned list, but there's like this time where you could still get it up until like 2023. Hopefully it's gone, except for it's not banned in China, and we buy all kinds of cheap stuff from China all the time. What it is it's a flame retardant that goes in mattresses, it goes in carpet, it goes in draperies, carpet pads, it goes into like flame retardant clothing. It's also in electronics like circuit boards and around that stuff to hopefully make it not start on fire. And what I think is really interesting is this is one of those little rabbit holes I was telling you about that I go on, is that I found the study that showed that when they gave BDE-209 to mice, they lost bone. Their bone started deteriorating really rapidly within 60 days. When they gave them sodium butyrate, the bone loss was stopped and it began to reverse. So then they asked the question, why? How did this toxin affect the mice? Well, it turns out it disrupted the gut microbiome and it killed off a bunch of butyrate producers. So they lost butyrate. That's why they gave them the butyrate, and the bone came back for these mice. And then I started to ask, like, well, was there studies in humans on this and what BDE-209 is that it's really a problem? So I just quickly did a little search, and it turns out there's a huge focus on firefighters, because firefighters obviously are around flame retardant materials a lot, but they're also inhaling the fire smoke and the pollutant in the air all the time. And it turns out that firefighters have really high levels of BDE-209, and they're worried about it causing all different types of issues. Now, the reason why it's banned in the first place is it causes like testicular issues, infertility issues. So this is an environmental toxin that's kind of ubiquitous at this point, especially if you have a home that's got stuff in it that's 10 years older or more. Like you have BDE-209 in your stuff. But when I started to like think about this, it's like, wow, all the fires in LA, the fires just kind of in the West recently, that particulate is what the firefighters are breathing in. They're getting that BDE-209, which is probably disrupting their microbiome as well. I don't know if it's leading to bone loss because we don't have that data yet, but it is another part of the story for especially for folks who are like, man, I did not take antibiotics for the last 20 years. I've really been diligent about my gut health, but like for whatever reason, I'm still having bone loss. I'm still not seeing the health I want. Well, it could be the air we're breathing in. We could be getting it from the VOCs in our house or from the water. These environmental pollutants are affecting our gut microbiome in a way, kind of like antibiotics are. And so taking Tributyrin X or taking some sort of butyrate or upping your fiber even during fire season, during exposures to these types of things, I think is a really important new idea and a new angle around, like, especially for people who keep questioning, like, I've done everything. How is my gut still not good? I've done everything. How is my bone still not good? And this environmental toxin exposure that probably none of us were aware of could be that vector.
Wow, I found that so interesting and so nice that there is something we can do because so often we feel so helpless, like, there's nothing I can do, my carpet, my this, my that. Yeah, so I think that is, yeah, I was just so intrigued by that, and then that's why I asked you to share that. Well, we could go on because this is such an and I'm sort of like you, I love reading research, and I love going finding everything that has to deal with bone that can help us, and this certainly can, and it's not that hard to add to our life, which is also another wonderful thing. And, it's not the only thing we do, of course, and we do many things for the gut, but this is something, a step that a lot of times just isn't known and is something that's so wonderful. So I can't thank you enough. Is there anything we left out that you want to share, last minute, or anything you want to end on before? Oh, I should tell people that you're very kind and you're giving everybody a 15% discount. So I'll have that link in the show notes for everybody. So thank you for that. But is there anything that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I know I just talked about this like environmental toxin that's kind of pervasive in our environment right now. I think there's been a lot of fear in talks and like a lot of negativity towards like, oh, this toxin over here, this glyphosate over there, this Wi-Fi, whatever. And I'm not saying there's not merit to these things. Actually, I just described a whole procedure on how you could be disrupting your microbiome on accident and losing bone on accident. So I'm not saying that toxins don't exist and they aren't impacting us negatively. But what I am saying is someone who's been in the game for 16 years and I've been through a lot of ups and downs and a lot of fads and a lot of excitement that became nothing. I think I'm hoping that the conversation is going to start moving from fear to the future where you're not going to rip your carpet out tomorrow. You're not going to replace all your electronics tomorrow. And that's okay. We're not going to turn off every blue light at night. We're not going to get rid of all of Wi-Fi, and that's okay. But we might want to take the next step. And what the next step that I am encouraging most people to think about is what compounds, what inputs does a body need in this Western world with all these toxins around us in order to feel safe and be healthy? Because I think the cat is out of the bag. We cannot go back to the hippie communities of the 60s, and we can't put all those chemicals back out of the water supply and all that stuff. But what we can do is we can look to compounds like tributylin. We can look to other ideas and other supplements that can help this biology, this experience be resilient in the face of all this stuff, and we can move away from the fear into the future, one that's hopeful and one in which we, hopefully have a lot less disease and a lot less symptoms.
Well, I love that. You just summed it all up. And that's my philosophy too. My philosophy is that, what can we do? And we can go from fear to empowerment and all these things that we're going to do for our gut and our bones are going to help every part of our body so that we really can live a vibrant, healthy life. And we don't have to sit there and dwell on all the negative things that exist. So I can't thank you enough for joining me today. It's always a pleasure. Let's make it a little more than every 4 years, and and thanks so much, Stephen. It's really been a pleasure.
Thanks, Margie.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Stephen as much as I did, and now have a better understanding of postbiotics, butyrate, and tributylin, and how this can make a big difference for our bones, our gut, our overall health. All the links that Stephen talked about will be in the show notes, but he gave everybody a 15% discount. And that link is healthygut.com/HBTRIX. So thank you so much for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and subscribe so more people can learn about it and spread the message even further. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.